The show was so great for me because it pushed me in so many ways. Like as a singer, as someone who could see themselves as part of like a musical theater community, which is not just something I ever thought I was or aspired to be. Those are all new. But as a rapper, like it was really easy stuff that was really, but for this community, it was really impressive, right? And so because I'm so comfortable in the form, like it became a thing where I could play so much within it, you know, and Lynn too. And knowing Lynn for as long as I had too, like us being friends and be able to interact like that as well. Like I knew I was scripted to lose that battle, but I would try to figure out new ways every night to win that battle.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
David Diggs is an actor. He sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. Is there a typical first step that you like to take when you're first trying to wrap your arms around how to play a character?
This varies a little bit depending on the medium, right? I'm a theater kid, so I grew up doing that. So if I have a process, as you're speaking of, like most of the foundational elements of it for me come from that. And then TV and film stuff is something I feel like I'm still very much learning. And so that feels a little more experimental to me. And so I try things out differently. But I will say, I think because I come from theater, but also because I'm a writer and I love words. So the script for me, I just try to look for as many clues as possible that might be physical clues, if that makes sense. Like I'm not naturally, in terms of an actor, like there used to be for me a much greater disconnect between what my brain was doing as an actor and what my body was doing as an actor. And I remember I did this show, one of my mentors growing up, a poet and educator, Mark Bamuti Joseph, and he put me in a play. This is like a few years pre-Hamilton, but he put me in this show called Word Becomes Flesh. So it was basically like a choreo poem performed by 5 Black men. So it's all in verse and it's all danced. And Bamuti's whole thing, his whole process is that words don't exist for him as disconnected from the body. It was a very personal piece that he wrote. And so being forced to connect every piece of language to movement for me was so useful because it illustrated how disconnected those things had actually been for me. As an actor, I'd always been a guy who loves table work. I like to sit down for a long time, read the script over and over again and play
sitting down, not trying it. And partially because trying it scared me.
Yeah. But I think getting to do that sort of changed that for me. And now I find that one of the first things that I do is I'm like, is there something about how this person talks or where they're from? Even if it's a slight dialect shift or just a pace of speech, because speaking is physical too, right? It's a physical act. The way that noise is produced in your body is physical. And so it can be really slight. Like recently getting to play Frederick Douglass relatively recently and getting to like try and place his voice in a certain place. That once I got that, I just need something little that's going to affect my body. And then I feel confident, in air quotes, confident that I'll be able to, as confident as I am about anything ever, that I'll be able to sort of construct a performance around it. But so sort of the first thing for me is like reading and trying to place it somewhere, even if that all is going to change later. I just need a place for it to exist in my body.
Oh, that's so interesting. Wherever that is, wherever that lands, it's almost like it fools you kind of into thinking like, okay, I found that place, so now I can confidently do that. Even if it doesn't make much sense, like as long as it's fooling you into thinking like that's where that is.
Exactly. And it might all change. It's just a place to start so that I know I'm actually connected to my body.
Right.
Because that's not a thing that comes naturally to me.
There must be something that was really beneficial to you about poetry, / rap. I'm making that a big a SWAT there, about connecting that word wise to your body, like you're saying, and performance, right? I mean, this, like, starting out like that must have had some kind of benefit.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think, and it's funny, I wasn't able to make the leaps before because they existed as separate things in my head. But I've been rapping for longer than I've been acting. And I think it's because it wasn't until I started doing a little bit of work on my voice that I realized what a physical thing the voice is, And I think that was a bit of a turning point for me. So, but making rap songs and performing rap songs really too, like playing rap shows is about energy management more than it's about character development, but it's still storytelling. And your job really is to make sure, and this is, I don't know, also speaks to the kind of actor I think I am, which is more useful in some projects than in others. But like, when I'm doing a play, like I'm not one of these guys who is not audience aware. Like I very much am like, because I'm used to energy management, like I'm constantly sort of tweaking what feels like the vibe in the room to me. Even if I'm here engrossed in this scene, if it feels like the vibe isn't vibrating as high as it needs to in order for this next moment that I know is coming up to sort of land right, I'll try to figure out what I can do in a scene to like raise that energy.
Interesting.
And I still, I find myself on camera doing similar things. There's no audience, but there is an energy in the room. And it's so funny because so much of what you're doing is ignoring it a lot of the time, trying to ignore like particular things that are happening behind the camera. But from your fellow actors and stuff, there's still energy exchange happening. And I find myself still attuned to that and still finding that to be a useful way of storytelling for me. And it does feel very musical. That's how you make songs, sort of. It's this process of like, it's a weird alchemy. You write a thing, you think it's going to work, you record it, and you're like, that most of that works, but this moment right here, something needs to happen energetically here. So the process, at least for me, is about figuring out what that thing is and then seeing how that affects everything after that. So figuring out how those things are connected has been a big part of my journey thus far, and something I'm still working on.
You were a track and field star, right?
Yeah.
I love asking actors who were athletes if any of that actually comes into play or set the stage for something, for the work you do now, like whether it's endurance wise or whether it's competition wise. I mean, like, is any of that true?
Yeah, I mean, the physicality of it, again, I think for me, the thing that I find most useful is being happy with repetition. Like that's so much of training. In track particularly, it's drills. And I was a hurdler. Drills. You do the same drill 100 times in a workout, and it's all about doing the drill, figuring out what was wrong with it, and then trying it again and fixing that thing and probably finding 10 other problems. A lot about shooting TV feels like that. Rehearsing for plays feels like that. It's about being not only comfortable with repetition, but really enjoying it. I'll take as many takes as someone will give me of a thing just to be like, all right, well, we got that, but also we could try this or not, or we could just try to replicate it and it won't be the same. And we can see what that was too. I like that. And I think part of that comes from being an athlete. And also, when you're a relatively high level athlete, like I've been watching the Olympics lately and I was never that good. But it was close. I almost made the trials a couple of times. And like, there's a kind of superhero feeling that you have from being able to do something physically that most people can't do. And then you get older and that goes away. And what that is translated to for me is I really like doing my own stunts, it turns out, much to the chagrin of most stunt teams. But so far, most people are really good about working with me and giving me the necessary training to allow me to do it. Because again, it's just this moment of purely physical. When you line up on the starting line of a race, that kind of adrenaline of like, this could really anything could happen right now. And and I'm gonna leave everything out there physically. And like it's a little bit dangerous. Like you could get hurt. There are all kinds of things that can go wrong, especially in the hurdles, you know. So that kind of adrenaline rush is totally gone from my life, basically, except if I'm doing stunts where it's like
interesting.
because you know, I get that adrenaline before I go on stage, before I do a scene. It's a similar thing, but it's not the same because you're not in that same kind of physical danger. But when I do a stunt, it's like, oh yeah, something could go wrong. It's not going to. Everybody on a TV set is there to make sure an actor looks good. So like, and doesn't get hurt. So you're not going to get hurt, but you could.
Where were you in your career when Hamilton came along? Like what were your plans? What were you seeing as your trajectory to try and break into this?
I think I didn't have much of a plan, and I don't remember ever really trying to break into a thing. Like the one I had moved to LA from Oakland a few years prior. And that was sort of the biggest career move I had ever made. Sort of, it was me and Rafael Casal who we, you know, we were already working on Blindspotting, the film. We had our producers for that film and started working with us and trying to, you know, we were trying to teach ourselves how to write a script basically, but we were doing these drives up and down, back and forth from Oakland to LA, like every week, basically. And we would spend a lot of time in LA, and there was something about it. It was like, man, these Hollywood producers really want to make a movie with us. We got to be there. We can't. So we moved. It also helped. I had been doing a play in Marin, the Marin Theater Company, one of Terrell McCraney's plays. They were doing the brothers and sister plays. So I did In the Red and Brown Water there. And I met who would at the time become my girlfriend on that show, and she lived in LA, which made it even easier it seemed like the stars were really aligned for me to move to LA. And so we did it. We got up and we moved, and that's sort of when I started clipping. Like my band formed with Clipping. We're two friends of mine who I've known for a very long time, but we had never done anything together. And now we were all living in the same place, so we start making music together. And all these things started happening that were artistically really interesting. And it was, I don't know if it was being in LA, but it was being totally out of my comfort zone and like having to hustle for money, however you could sort of figure out how to scrape rent together, but also really needing to be an artist in a different way, because like I was so comfortable in the Bay. Life was like, it was coming to me, you know, it was just easy to live there for me because it felt like home. And now like the art was the thing that made me feel like a person, not my surroundings. And so I needed it in a different way, which I think made me work harder at it. But I was still in the same way I still am, I think, like all over the place. So by the time Hamilton comes along, we start doing early workshops. So I'm already part of Freestyle Love Supreme, so we're doing like improvised rap things. Every so often we'd go on small tours, a couple weeks at a time, or we'd go play a bunch of one-off gigs around the country. I'm also touring that show Word Becomes Flesh. And so I'm doing that. And I'm also on tour with Clipping a bunch. And so I'm managing to scrape together a living as an artist, but none of it in the town I live in, right? I couldn't make a dime in LA. So I sort of had to be on the road in order to make money. But it was, you know, sort of making it work. And it was definitely really fun and definitely really artistically fulfilling. And then when I am home, me and Rafael are working on the film script or like making web series or like doing kind of just like a bunch of artist development. But it's not what we thought of it as, but like teaching ourselves how to shoot things and like, you know, having really just because we wanted to make stuff, and no one was asking us to make things. And so all of this is sort of happening at the same time. And I start doing the early workshops of Hamilton, which involved me like coming out. They would get a few people together, a cast worth of people together, and sing through the new things Lynn had written, or, you know, try things out. And I never really thought I had any business being there, because they were all, you know, the first time I touched any Hamilton material was up at Vassar at this New York Stage and Film thing, and the rest of the cast included Joshua Henry and Anika Noni Rose and Chris Jackson and all these people who were just like, I've never sang before also in my life. So like, I'm looking at sheet music now being like, okay, well, I played the saxophone. Like I know what these notes mean, but I don't actually know how to produce them at all. So like, just sort of hang out. These people are wonderful people, but I'm so out of my depth. And I knew they had me there to really try out the rap stuff on. That's what I assumed. It's like, but Lynn's writing some like barred up raps and I can do them on the first time that he shows them. So I don't have to, it won't, you know, they'll know what they really sound like if I do them. That's what I assumed was my function there. It's like, since you don't have a lot of time to work on these workshops, here's like a rapping ringer who you can bring in to really see how the rap stuff sounds.
Right.
That's what I assumed was going on. And then when they went to the public, you know, they were like, hey, so we're going to go do it off Broadway. And I was like, with me? Yeah. And so like a bunch of things had to get put on hold kind of, because I'd been, you know, like, we're working on a clipping album. We're still grinding away on this movie. I was like, okay, well, I do want to do this now. I'm like pretty invested in it. And I really love the show, but it just didn't seem like an option. I had to tell everybody, guys, I guess I'm going to move to New York for 3 or 4 months and we'll do this thing. And then I'll be back because, you know, I'll do it off Broadway. And there's no way, if it goes to Broadway, which who knows, which I'd never been, you know, I don't do musical. I didn't know the process anyway. I was like, who knows if it goes to Broadway, but even if it does, there's no way. Everybody else must have been busy, so it won't be me. And then, anyway, and then it ended up being a year and a half of my life. And a totally like life-changing experience, right? And from a career perspective, but also from a artist perspective, in a lot of ways, a life-affirming time, because it was still the same way I always work on everything. Still, these are my friends asked me to do it. Like my friends who I've collaborated for many years. I've known Lynn and Tommy and all those cats for a decade at that point. Like they asked me to do a thing. And since my friend asked me to do it, I said, yeah. And that's what we did. And we made something that we really liked. And it turned out it hit. But like the fact that it could hit that big, and for me, the process of accepting it and being open to it was still the same, was really gratifying and affirming to me. It didn't pressure me to change the way I had gone about accepting work or looking for work in my life, you know?
And was it, I know this is a weird question, but was it a little bit like sad to have to put all those other things on hold, because you're kind of a person that needs to have all that going on different sides of like the writing and the performing in both aspects of rapping and acting. Like was that, even though it's like amazing you're off Broadway, but was that actually something that was kind of like a downer in a weird way to talk about it like that?
Yeah, it really would have been if I didn't have the friends and collaborators that I have, but I do. And so they actually wouldn't let me. Like Raphael moved to New York. He was like, I get it. You're swamped and you're doing a thing that's important and you're not good at email anyway. And you're not, you like are really sometimey with text. So like, I'm going to come there and like, I'll just hang out in your dressing room or whatever. I don't know. But like, I think we're not getting anything done this way, and maybe we'll get something done like if I'm there. So we moved to New York and we did exactly that. That's on Broadway, hanging out in my dressing room. And like every time I would get off stage, you'd come in there and we'd like talk about the film or one of the various other things or whatever. And then I'd run back on stage to the thing, you know? So, so I still got to sort of live this multi-hyphenate lifestyle that I'd become accustomed to. And the same with my clipping collaborators, like kept making music, kept sending me beats. We kept on the weekends talking about the album we would eventually make. And, you know, so it kept all those sides of the brain firing. And it was a good learning experience for me about, there's not actually a long amount of time. I think that you have to give 100% of yourself to something artistic. There is part, you know, certainly in the building phase, it is helpful. But like, you know, my experience with Snowpiercer now versus the first season, I was so like out of sorts trying to figure it out. And now if I didn't have those other things, I would be terribly bored in Vancouver, you know, because it actually requires very little of me to do that show, relatively speaking. And so it's actually been great this season, we were editing the TV show while I was in quarantine. And so we were editing the Blindspotting TV show while I was in quarantine, waiting for Snowpiercer to start. And significantly into the first couple of blocks, we were still in the edit. So I got to come to my trailer and, you know, get into the virtual editing suite and sit there and talk to the editors about this thing that was occupying a ton of my passion and my heart, you know?
Right.
So, and the usefulness of that is that like your heart is still engaged then when you go back to your other gig.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like,
it almost feeds that other, almost feeds the other work.
The ship runs on enthusiasm, something me and Raphael always say, you know? And so I gotta be juiced about something. And like, honestly, every day of TV is not exciting, but like, if I'm excited about something, that energy can carry over, and I can be like, even if the energy is like, guys, we got to get through this so I can get back to, you know, it's still energy exchange, like we're talking about. Right.
I didn't have the opportunity to see you on the stage in Hamilton, so the first time I saw it was on my TV, which is, you know, sad but still amazing. But what struck me about your performance was, and I know you put confidence in quotes earlier, but I wrote this down. Like you had a striking confidence moment to moment in this thing. Like there's a lot of performances that I find like superlatively successful that don't have that. And people were like laughing before you were saying things after a while, and like anticipating, because and I felt like I was that too. Like, I know I'm going to laugh at this. Like that's an unusual experience for me as an audience member. Like, I'm so invested in them entertaining me that I'm almost entertained before the entertaining moment. But can you explain that? Can you explain, like, did you just settle into some kind of thing after a while, or was it because you were there from before the beginning? Is that part of it?
It all is part of it. I think, you know, the version that was recorded is a version more than well over 100 shows in, right? So there's that also. So we've been doing it. We're very comfortable with it. There's the fact that the show was so great for me because it pushed me in so many ways. Like, as a singer, as someone who could see themselves as part of like a musical theater community, which is not just something I ever thought I was or aspired to be. Those are all new. But as a rapper, like, it was really easy stuff that was really, but for this community, it was really impressive, right? And so, like, starting from that place of confidence is like, at least on the technical side of things, like, I knew I was going to nail that every night. And those had proven to be kind of the favorite moment, you know, or really memorable moments for people that really loved, like, Lafayette's fast rap, which, like, is not that fast, but it is for this community, you know? So, like, there were these things, it was like, and the cabinet battles they always went, like, people always enjoyed them. And so, because I'm so comfortable in the form, like, it became a thing where I could play so much within it, you know, and Lynn too. And so, and knowing Lynn for as long as I had too, like, us being friends and be able to interact like that as well. Like, I knew I was scripted to lose that battle, but I would try to figure out new ways every night to win that battle, because why not? Because we're here and we're doing it hundreds of times. And Lynn is, you know, an incredible improviser also. So he was going to take anything that I threw at him and, like, throw it back at me. So, like, there was a confidence in, especially by the time of the recorded performance, there's a huge amount of confidence in the show itself. The show works. The show was going to work whether I was in it or not, turns out. Like, that show works. My parts of it, like, I was very comfortable in the role and in the material. And so there's that. And there was such a confidence in the group of people I was around that we could play. And so the secret sauce for me was just about having as much fun as possible every night. And that meant if I wasn't getting from the audience, I was going to get it from my castmates. And and then the occasion where you got it from everybody is this really beautiful thing, because And Jefferson in particular is in this sort of rarefied air where you get to wink at the audience all the time because like he's so full of himself that he knows people are watching him. He believes that people are watching him at any given point. So if there were a camera, he was going to look straight down the barrel, right? And so particularly once you hit that second act, like, and you can develop this relationship with the audience in the space, like it did feel like there was that kind of energy exchange where, and at that point, everybody knows the show too. So you're going out there and people are excited to like see the number, and you get to see that they're excited about seeing the number. And if you look at, you know, you can see somebody in the first row, like starting to lose their shit, and you can make fun of them losing their shit, you know, like it's great. It's great. Those things became so much more like concerts by the end of it than they were like plays, because people were so invested in it.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah, it felt like being a rock star. It was wild.
Well, so for somebody who is so sensitive to energy like that, though, was it ever a point where it's like this energy is almost too much? It's almost like this overwhelming energy that's not that I can't fit into. It's almost like that thing, that orb out there that is the audience is so happy to be there, so expecting of everything that it's almost like a impenetrable wall or something like that.
I think it requires so much back from you. And so when I stopped performing the show was when I stopped feeling capable of giving that every night. That's what became clear was like, people were like mortgaging their houses to get in these things. The tickets were so expensive and it was so, you know, like, and everybody in there felt so lucky to be there. And you really did want to be able to give that all back to them. And they deserved it. They were, you know, and so when I finally, you know, a year and a half into it, felt beat down enough that like I didn't have that anymore, and like even the joy of the experience wasn't enough to keep that coming back for me. That's when I asked to leave, you know, because I realized that like it was gonna affect the show if I was still. It asked so much from you energetically. And it's not just at the show, it's also when you leave the show, you know, people are so high off that show. Everybody wants to come on stage. Everybody wants to come backstage. It's great. It's beautiful. It created community in a way that like we used to take over 46th Street a couple of times a week, just as like a 15-minute block party, like right before call time. They would block off the streets and thousands of people would come out just to be near the thing, you know? So the way it created community was really, really special, but it asked a lot of you walking around New York at that time too. Just like being on like that was a lot. And so when it became a very heavy burden, I stopped doing it.
In those weeks leading up to it being a heavy burden, like, can you detail a moment where you needed to pull from somewhere else to even step on the stage? Like, did you ever have a night like that where you're like, this is getting to be where I don't have what I need right now to even rise to the occasion of this energy? And where did you pull it from to actually get up there?
Yeah, I do remember one time like walking I was taking the subway to the theater. So I was living uptown on 146, and I taking the subway down, and like, you know, I had my like hat on or whatever, and my headphones in. I'm just trying not to be, and like several people had recognized me and were talking to me, and like, you know, I'm smiling and like having conversations, but really like trying to get rid of people. And then Times Square was nuts that day, and trying to get through it, just like the sea of people and like 10 to 15 more people. Oh my God, you know, like whatever. And I was just, and they were so happy, and I was so angry. I was just mad, you know. It hadn't been a good day, and like, but I was also I was not letting go of it in the way that I usually do. And I got into the theater, and like I'm so rarely in a bad mood. Actually, I was just like in a bad mood. And me and Oak used to stretch together every day before the thing, like with our foam rollers, like on the stage. I was doing that. And I think maybe either I asked him or he just knew, because, you know, we were really close at that point. I spend the whole show with him, right? We're kind of inseparable in the show. So I can't remember if I asked him if he just sensed it, but he was like, I got you. And he told me jokes on stage the whole night.
Wow.
Like he just like talk shit the whole night. And Og is the most fearless actor I've ever worked with, actually. And he would just, it didn't matter if the mic was on or not. Like he made it his like personal mission to make sure that I was happy, like that I was laughing on stage.
Wow.
So like that was it.
I did have the great fortune of seeing you in White Noise, though.
Oh, word! Oh, amazing!
And that was really impacting for me, man. And the conversation with my wife on the way home was also very interesting for us.
Yeah, I think a lot of people had that experience, like leaving that show and it being like not necessarily like a night what you expect after a night at the theater, right?
Yeah. There's so many things to talk about that, but so don't. This might be a belittling thing to talk about, but did you actually make a quiche every night on stage? I mean, from scratch.
Man, I had to go through the motions. It didn't have to be edible. So
it looked like it was, though. It looked like after a while, it was just like, he's doing this.
I know. Yeah. We cut a lot of corners on the things that would actually make it taste good. And then and you really just are putting it in the microwave. But that was part of it too, is that you smell the eggs cooking, right? And
it wasn't even a microwave though. It was like a portable oven.
Like toaster.
Yeah. If it was a microwave, I would have left.
It would have been like, nah. Yeah.
It would have been like, who wants to eat that?
Yeah. But it was,
was having something to do like that helpful? Like, because you did that for like a long time. It was like a half hour as the play is going on.
That's right. I'd sort of forgotten about that. I mean, we knew that it was going to have to become a very second nature thing. Yeah. So it was in that way helpful. It was helpful because we knew it was going to be one of the obstacles. It was a signpost in the show. When we get to this moment, this is going to have to feel like breathing.
Yeah.
So we knew we were going to have to rehearse a lot. So really, like, as soon as we were up on our feet, we were rehearsing that one. Like, it was like, let's set this now so that by the time we're finally at the run, like, it's not tripping you up at all. And so in that sense, like, it was really useful. It's nice. Anything that gets me out of my head is useful. Right. And so, yeah, so that was good. But I think, that show's just brilliant, and I think the moments of tension that it was creating that evolved over the course of the show, that by the fact that, you know, based on how I'm feeling about Tommy Sadowski that night, you know, like whatever, you know, sometimes it's like, wow, oh man, it's pretty great to just cook for my friend, and then like some nights it was like, this motherfucker really thinks he owned me right now. Like, how, you know, and whatever it was going to culminate in this bowling match at the end. Like such a wild thing. Yeah. You know, so it's the construction. I mean, it's Susan Murray Park, so obviously, but like the construction of that show formally really allows that moment in the bowling alley to be different every night, to feel like it is a culmination of everything that you've experienced over the last, you know, couple of hours, and you just let it out in this bowling match. Yeah.
And did he feel the same way too, Tom, about that? Like did he rise to the occasion of that, like flowing with the energy?
I think so. I hope he felt like I was, you know, giving it back to him enough. Like Tommy's got on stage, like that dude's got energy. Like he's really, really, he's so good. He's so good. It was such a dream getting to work with him. He just, so yeah, but I mean, there was always a nice, like, sort of give and take there, and like, who, you know, playing for the points, you know, seeing who could win this one, and like feeling when you lose a point.
One of the first people I talked to on this podcast was Sheila Vand. And she was talking about how excited she was. This was how long ago this was, about this show that she was doing. They did one episode, and then last December I had Allison Wright on, the amazing Allison Wright, and she was talking about this filming this next season. But they both had this thing, and I was afraid to ask. It felt like, like, is there something? Is this show just hard to do or something? Like what is it? This set that's the problem. Is it being away and being on this set? Is that for Snowpiercer? Of course, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is this the problem? It's just the way this is made.
It is. I think it's a combination of things with that show. Obviously, I don't know when you talked to Allison, but like the last year of shooting was nuts for everybody making anything,
right?
Because of the quarantine of it all and not being able to leave and all that stuff. But even before that, it's a show that is super intense, that requires a lot from you, like physically and emotionally. You know, it's action, 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 but doesn't always. Here's the thing. It's brilliant actors on this show, right? Like,
yes.
And I think brilliant actors who are used to working with text that is like pretty elevated. And it's not that this text on this show isn't, but there are so many events because of the kind of show that it is, that oftentimes it can start to feel like it's a show about the events that's not giving you what you need to reach the emotional truth of the moment. But that doesn't mean you don't have to do it, right? So you still have to go there, even though you know that the show doesn't necessarily care about it. But like, it's the only way you're going to get like the show itself, not anybody on the show, not the writers. It's not any of that. It's not a thing like that. It's just that, to me, the nature of this show sometimes is that it has to be so much more concerned with what is happening than the people it is happening to, because it has to have this forward motion. Otherwise, it feels like the train is holding still. Right. So like, it has to feel like the train is moving all the time. And that is about action. And so I think sometimes everybody had this at some point or at various points. You come to set and you just like have to muster up a way to care about a scene that isn't about what your character is going through at all. It actually is just about getting you through this car to the next car so that the action can continue. But that doesn't mean you can not give this performance. It doesn't mean I can just walk from one side of the car to the other. You still have to, and I think if the show works for people, I think that's why it works, because like all of these actors have figured out a way to do this, and each of us figure it out in our own ways. But like someone like Allison, I think Allison is so stunning on this show. Sheila too, all of them. But like, I think Allison is such a phenomenal actor. And what I've watched her do in these scenes, I'm always so thankful when I'm acting with her, because she figures it out. We're in the like couple of minutes of rehearsal that we're going to get, and we're breaking it down, and she'll be like, this is what I need here from a character perspective. This is what I need in order to be able to say this thing that just opens the door. I know it just opens the door, but I need this. If we can find this, I'm good. And we figure it out and we find it, and then she's brilliant. You know, and like, it's always such a lesson to me. Working with Jennifer is like that too. Like, working with great actors is so great, because like I get to steal their process, and those two in particular like are very good about being like, this is what I need. I understand what the show needs to happen, and I want that to happen as quickly as anybody else too. Here's what I need in order to play that appropriately. So let's take the time to figure that out, and then when you do, I'm going to give you a brilliant performance on every take. You'll be able to use every single take. And that's the way I feel about when I'm in scenes with Allison. There's never been anything unusable that she's ever done. I'm not that guy necessarily. Like, I do a lot of playing around in front of the camera. You might get one. Hopefully you didn't run out of time, but.
And just that idea of knowing when to speak up, knowing when to say what you need as an actor. It feels like actors like don't know that. It's something that they have to learn or something. It's
hard to do in that situation, particularly TV. It moves so fast. And you're so aware of the dollars actually that are being spent. Every TV show I've ever been on, I feel this way. I am somehow acutely aware that every minute I'm spending $100,000, whatever it is, you know? So like, you sometimes feel like you don't have the right to be like, hey, I know it's just acting, but like, I can't do this if I don't. Sometimes you feel like you don't have that right. And it's the people who I've had the fortune to work with, who I think are truly great, are the ones who understand the value of what they're giving in that space. Who are like, particularly the women. It's such a hard thing for women, I think, and that I may have done things that are more like worthy of the description diva than Allison ever has, but I bet no one will ever call me that. And I bet she has to worry about that all the time. You know, like I bet Jennifer has come across that so many times in her life, or Mickey Sumner and the wonderful women I work with on the show, Sheila, like they probably come across that all the time. But literally I could have, I've seen this happen. I'll have the exact same conversation that they've had with a director or whatever, and nobody blinks an eye. They have it. Look around the room and maybe there's an eye roll, or someone's looking at their watch, or like, you know, like this idea of women speaking for what they need, even, you know, and it's even now, even in the place we think we are as an industry, like these things are ingrained into it. This idea of a diva is like really entrenched in the industry, and it's gross, and it makes me applaud even more the women who I watch do it and then sit back and watch their performances. And it's like, that's why your show's good. Actually, you should beg every actor to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Daveed Diggs, I hope we can do this again one day.
Anytime. This is the best. I'll do this all the time. It's so fun.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.